I think it's probably a number of those things really. I mean, the strategy is trying to address a range of those issues. It's very much about, we have become the number one female sport, but we still know there's an enormous amount of girls and women out there who still want to play the game who aren't playing currently. There's a big latent demand, so there's a real commitment to get those girls and women's football, keep growing the game. I think that's really important. There's a commitment through the new elite unit to make sure we're developing the most talented players and coaches. We're number 7 in the world, but we want to make sure that we're competing on a global scale, for the long term. So that's about making sure that we keep working hard to produce better players, better coaches. It's about securing more sponsorship, because ultimately the game, we're competing across the world really for wanting our players to stay and play in this country and play in the Women's Super League, and the Women's Super League to be admired as a really good and strong league, and that means ultimately generating resources for it to become semi-professional and hopefully sort of over the medium term professional. So that's sponsorship, that's broadcast revenues, that's generating revenues through fans coming to watch the games as well. So, there's a whole range of things I think that, that have been really successful so far that we need to keep building on over the next 4 or 5 years. Yeah, well, there's 33 teams have bid for sort of between 18 20 places. It's about obviously confirming who's in Women's Super League, the top division, but also creating a brand new second tier. We're currently assessing those at the moment, and I think we'll be hoping to make an announcement on who those successful clubs are in May. So we launched it in October, so it's very much on the back of the Olympics. We called it Game Changer because we felt that, particularly with the big debate around the lack of women's sports coverage, it became quite a political topic in the newspapers and amongst politicians, and the success of the Olympics and the female athletes. We felt that women's football was really a good place to capitalise on that whole momentum around women's sport. And what we've seen since Game Changer launched, obviously at the moment we're currently expanding the Women's Super League, so we have 33 applications in to create the second division. We've seen new commercial partners coming into the women's game. We've got 3 big commercial partners to announce shortly who are investing and supporting the women's game. The new deal with BBC, which is a fantastic step forward for the women's game, to supplement already a great deal with ESPN. So I think we've really seen things move on since the Olympics. I think so, yeah. I think it's not just a WSL. The new BBC deal covers Women's Super League highlights, the England Women's World Cup qualifiers, which will come later in the year. We've also secured a deal to cover the European Women's Championships, not just the England games, but they're going to cover most of the major games in the tournament. Yeah, there will be a real momentum because people have got a chance to follow the Women's Super League. They'll see the FA Cup, Women's Cup final live on television, follow England in the Euros, see more of the Women's Super League when we come back after the break, and then into the World Cup qualifiers as well. So there's a real chance to get behind the women's game and follow it. It's not just prevalent, is it, to women's football? But I think, yes, I think what we're seeing is that there are more and more men, more and more boys coming to watch women's football, seeing women's football for the first time, and nearly everybody I've ever come across who's gone to see top-level women's football is really impressed by the quality and standard. And when people get a chance to see not only the Women's Super League, but England in the Euros, where you've got some of the top sides in the world, and that's on broadcast on BBC television, and I think that's all about changing attitudes and mindsets, and I think the Olympics did that as well. People who follow GB Olympics, they won a lot of fans through the way that they played and the quality of the football, and the tournament generally really, really impressed people. So the more people see it, I think the more those attitudes are going to change. I think Heather, it's a fantastic appointment that she's on the board, but also there's a number of women in really senior level jobs in the organisation now. There's Julie Harrington, who's been made Managing Director of St George's Park, our new National Football Centre. Our HR director's female. There's a female director organising Wembley. Michelle Farrer, who's a director in terms of all of the England operations. So there's a number of women in and coming through into senior positions in the organisation, and that has really changed since when I first came in. There was very few women in those roles. So I think the organisation has changed significantly. think it's difficult. It's difficult to say really, because obviously women's football always gets compared to men's football, and one's a multi-billion-pound industry, generating literally billions of pounds globally in broadcast and sponsorship revenues. You know, one's sort of an emerging sport that's just coming into, if you like, the mainstream of people's consciousness in terms of, you know, starting to see the game on television and starting to come to the games. Birmingham were always strong. I thought, you know, they went very, very close in the first year to winning it, sort of got picked right at the end. Lincoln have signed, you know, they've got quite a few of our back five of the England team are in the Lincoln squad, so they'll be strong. So I think it'd be interesting. But I'm not going to stick on the line.